Hello and welcome to a look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. Back with me to do that are Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK, and Rachel Watson, the deputy political editor for the Scottish Daily Mail. So let's have a run through those front pages. Let's start with the Telegraph and the warning from the US that Russia has troops in place to invade Ukraine any day now. The Daily Mirror's headline is "Get Out" as British nationals are told to leave Ukraine immediately as a Russian invasion looms. The Times front page leads with the same warning from the Foreign Office to British nationals to leave Ukraine while commercial means are still available. The Daily Mail cites the 80-minute video call between NATO and European leaders to discuss the ongoing crisis. In other news, senior Tories publicly warn the Prime Minister against clinging to power if the police investigation into Number 10 parties finds that he broke the law. That's on the front page of the Eye. And according to The Guardian, the Treasury is pushing for almost all free COVID testing to end as soon as next month to save billions of pounds, and that's despite warnings from experts. So let's get into some of these in a bit more detail. Rachel, let's begin with you on the front page of The Times. That warning, and many of the front pages, of course, lead on Ukraine. Britain's told to get out of Ukraine while commercial means are available.
Yeah, this story dominates the front pages tomorrow, and you can see why. There's been a real escalation, it seems, in the fears of NATO allies in the course of today around what might be happening in Russia and whether they could be, as some of the front pages say, could invade Ukraine within days. And this is a warning that we see a number of those countries, including the UK government, have issued a warning to citizens to get out now while you still can, while those commercial flights are still there. I watched the briefing in the White House earlier where they explicitly said, get out while the commercial flights are running because we might not be able to come back for you. They said, while you can. And it was made clear that, that might mean that, if there is an invasion, if things do escalate over the weekend, early next week, those flights, rescue missions might not be able to happen. And it's on, I think it's the Mail and another couple of the papers have put a figure for the UK of 7,500 UK national dependents and dual citizens they believe are in Ukraine, and all of those people are this message is directed at them to get out now as quickly as possible before things escalate. It's obviously, in the course of today, there has been intelligence gained by the US who have shared this. There was that 80-minute video call, which seems to have ramped up fears and has led to these calls today.
And looking, Kevin, then at the front page of the Daily Express, the headline takes up most of the front page. It positively shouts, doesn't it? Invasion fears, Britain's told, get out now.
Yeah, we see it on most, if not all, front pages, certainly on the first editions anyway, of tomorrow's papers, a very stark warning, and it's as clear a sign, I think, as you could possibly get that Britain, America, other Western allies now believe that a Russian invasion of Ukraine is bound to happen. They don't want their own citizens being trapped in Ukraine when the conflict begins. We're told that, according to Downing Street, that the call that Rachel mentioned earlier between Western allies was a very sobering call. So clearly they were given intelligence information which would suggest that that Russia is on the verge of invading Ukraine. A spokesperson for Number 10 said that Boris Johnson feared for the security of Europe, which is obviously quite a chilling warning. I think it's important for us to bear in mind that, yes, Ukraine and Russia appear very far away, but where the worst come to the worst and conflict did happen, we would all feel the effects of it, maybe not literally on our doorstep or outside our front window, but the geopolitical ramifications would be enormous. And that is why the Western allies are moving heaven and earth to try and find a diplomatic solution to this, to try even at this 11th hour to avert war.
And the Mail, which you've already alluded to, Rachel, with this Get Out Now message as well, also talking about what the consequences might be if Russia does move against Ukraine in terms of this heavy package. It talks of heavy package of economic sanctions being ready to go. But of course, the great unknown, the great uncertainty at this point, even as people are preparing to leave, is whether this build-up actually means that an attack, an incursion is imminent, or whether it is a means of getting some concessions as the diplomatic route continues.
You know, we've been talking about this now for a number of weeks, concerns over Russia invading Ukraine, and the Western allies have tried with this. You know, there's been a lot of talk, as Kevin said, about trying to take the diplomatic route to this, if possible, talk about sanctions. But nothing seems to have stopped that, because as we see today, there has been some kind of ramping up. There's been intelligence gathered that now the US government, and who have relayed this to other Western countries and NATO allies, believe that actually an invasion is imminent. They say within days. And I heard somewhere Tuesday, you know, it could be as early as Tuesday, that they see either boots on the ground, or as was said by the National Security Advisor in the US, they think an aerial bombardment is probably the first thing that we would see from Russia. So whether, you know, these threats of sanctions don't seem to have worked so far, but I think this weekend could be pivotal in what happens next. We know that President Joe Biden is to speak to Vladimir Putin tomorrow. What will come of that, if anything? There's been a real kind of push this week. We've seen leaders holding meetings with Vladimir Putin, travelling to Russia, travelling to Ukraine, holding meetings with each other. There's a real rush here because nobody wants to go to war. You know, nobody wants to have a conflict. They want to try and use every means possible to stop that. And I think this weekend we're going to see much, much more of this.
And Kevin, the front page of the Daily Telegraph, just focusing here on the photograph, a really striking image of a Ukrainian Marine looking to the skies.
Yeah, you're right. It's an incredibly striking image. It's a fantastic photograph, and it really captures, I think, where we are right now. This idea as well that it's just a case of Russian tanks rolling into Ukraine and it's all done and dusted. I think that picture shows that would not be the case. There is a large Ukrainian army. There would be conflict. There would be bloodshed. This is one of the arguments that Boris Johnson has been making directly to the Russian people, saying, look, your sons and daughters will return home having lost their lives if this needless, as he would describe it, conflict takes place. It's not too late for Vladimir Putin to back down and avoid unnecessary bloodshed, because it's not a case of the massive Russian army, which obviously there's huge, you know, something like 130,000 Russian troops massed on the Ukrainian border, but they would meet fierce resistance and there would be a horrible and bloody conflict. So, as I say, we've got to hope that even at this 11th hour, that the discussions which are going on, this intense discussions which have been going on for the last few days and will continue right up until the last possible moment, will reach a successful conclusion.
Let's move away from Ukraine onto the front page of The Guardian, which is running with the lead story, Treasury push to end free COVID tests, despite warnings. These tests, Rachel, that have become so much a familiar part of our lives for longer than we care to remember now, but you know, really a very controversial move if it goes ahead.
Yeah, highly controversial move, and something we've spoken about previously. This was a story that was first kind of tested, if you like, by some government sources a couple of weeks ago in some Sunday newspapers and then disappeared quite quickly. But probably as we get to the point, we heard from Boris Johnson this week about how he wants to end coronavirus restrictions in England. In Scotland, it would be a different matter. We know Nicola Sturgeon's been more cautious on that. She doesn't want to go that way just yet. But this seems, you know, if that's how the UK government wants to go, it seems like a logical step that they would then begin discussions on, well, if we're not going to have the legal requirement to self-isolate, what comes next? And is that getting rid of free access to tests? Now, it looks here that The Guardian appear to have spoken to a number of sources who say that this is what the Treasury want to do. They want to move away from PCRs being widely available freely to people, and that they would be used in high risk and hospital settings, and possibly take the UK in line with other European countries or the US, where people do have to pay for tests. But I think we've seen the reaction this week from public health experts and the way that they've reacted to Boris Johnson wanting to end that legal requirement to self-isolate. And I expect we'd hear from those same public health experts that they think it's far too early to be talking about ending free tests. It's obviously part of the discussion that we have to have as we come out of the pandemic. How long does this go on for? What restrictions do we need? Measures, free access to various things. And I think that conversation, this will kickstart that conversation.
A really, really interesting one. Let's move on to the eye. Kevin, we'll look at this with you. Johnson told by top Tories, don't try to cling to power is the phrase that's used, and they're quoting Ian Duncan Smith telling the eye that if Boris Johnson were to receive a fine from the Metropolitan Police, it would be very tough for him to remain as Prime Minister after that.
Yeah, and I think he's right. The Conservatives historically have always viewed themselves and have pitched to the public as the party of law and order. It'd be quite difficult, I think, for them to go into the next general election with a leader who had received a fixed penalty notice from the police, essentially having broken the law. So yeah, I think it would be. I think politically, it would be incredibly difficult for Boris Johnson to stay in post. I think he would then come under massive pressure from his own side. Maybe a lot of those Tory MPs who have been holding off on putting in letters of no confidence, that might well be enough to tip them over the edge. Now, we know that Boris Johnson won't go down without a fight. There's reports elsewhere about the legal argument that he will make to defend himself now that he's been served with this questionnaire by the police. We've been told, there was briefing earlier in the week, allies of Boris Johnson telling one of the newspapers that he wouldn't go, he wouldn't resign if he were fined. Well, that might well be his intention now, but I just think that as I say, the political pressure on the Prime Minister, were that to take place, would be huge. I think it would be very difficult for him to hold on to his job.
And Rachel, then going back to the front page of the Telegraph, Johnson to deny breaking law at Downing Street flat. ABBA party specifically, and of course this front page, this was in before the news that Boris Johnson has indeed been sent a questionnaire by the Met Police came a bit too late for these first editions. But this story is specifically about the ABBA party. Just remind everyone about that.
Yeah, so this is the party that was held in the Downing Street flat and just happened to be the night that Dominic Cummings left Downing Street. We know, or we've heard of various people who attended this flat, and details have come out about ABBA being played, Carrie Johnson being there. And from this Telegraph story, we understand that Boris Johnson is not going to deny that he was in the number 10 flat, but what he is going to say is that he was there working. He wasn't taking part in any kind of party or any kind of social gathering, that he was sticking to the restrictions as they were, carrying out his work in his flat, which doubles up as his kind of home office, as I guess we've all kind of got used to recently. And that's the basis of this story.
And just time, I think, very quickly to look at the Matt cartoon on the front page of tomorrow morning's Telegraph. Reflecting on another story, Cressida Dick, the search for a new Metropolitan Commissioner. It says, if you don't cooperate, we can make things very unpleasant for you. We could make you Met Police Chief, someone being questioned at a police station. So it does reflect that whoever does take that job, they're going to have a very, very difficult set of challenges to face, aren't they? Kevin, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's ended obviously very badly for Cressida Dick. She lost the confidence of the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. So yeah, it's a bit of a poison chalice. I can't think of the last Met Commissioner who's come out of things looking with a reputation enhanced. So I mean, I'm sure, you know, it's a very prestigious, it's a huge job, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who want to take it on. But I think it would come with a massive health warning. It's not a job for the faint-hearted.
And when you're beginning to talk about something as deep as changing the culture, no quick fixes to that, I imagine.
No, well, Cressida Dick believed that she did have a plan in place. She presented it to The Mayor of London, I think he took one look at it and said that doesn't go far enough and withdrew support, and then her position was untenable. Whoever comes in has got an awful lot on his or her plate, as you say, accusations of misogyny, sexism, racism, you name it. It's a massive job.
And Rachel, a word from you on that cartoon by Matt?
Yeah, as Kevin said, this is a job that someone will have to take on, and they're taking it on at a horrible moment for the Met Police. There are huge issues that have been identified over the past couple of years, horrible cases that we've seen come from the Met Police, and to deal with that culture. So this isn't about going into a job and getting to grips with the day-to-day policing. It's about getting the confidence back off the public, off the politicians, off the can, so that you can carry out that day-to-day policing, but having to get to grips with these huge issues within the Met Police. You know, and as Kevin said, this is a huge job. There's a lot of prestige around it. People will want it, but it does come with that health warning of you have so much on your shoulders as soon as you step into this job.
OK, great to have you both with me this evening to look at tomorrow morning's front pages. Rachel Watson, Deputy Political Editor for the Scottish Daily Mail, and Kevin Schofield, Political Editor at HuffPost UK. Thank you both very much. And that's it for the papers this evening. They'll be back again tomorrow evening with the journalist and author Shaima Pereira and the political editor at The Sun on Sunday, Dave Wooding. And do join us then if you can. But for now, good night.